And with me on the program this morning, Labor frontbencher Nick Champion and also Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Alan Tudge. First to you, Alan, it was a very stark contrast, wasn't it, to the dignity and respect with which the remains and the bodies of the victims were treated in the Netherlands upon their arrival, to that awful, disgraceful situation we've seen over recent days at the crash site.
I think that's right, Kieran. It was a very dignified ceremony to mark the arrival of the first 40 bodies which were transferred to the Netherlands. They were transferred in 2 aircraft, one of which was an RAAF aircraft, and now the process for those bodies is to identify them and repatriate them, and unfortunately that may take a few days in and of itself. And then of course the next objective and the ongoing objective is to secure the site back in Ukraine and ensure that we can identify and repatriate the remains.
That securing the site, Alan Tudge, is obviously the Prime Minister's first goal here in terms of ensuring that all of the remains of the victims are located. There's a real fear here that remains are still in that crash site in those fields in eastern Ukraine, but not being found because of the lack of expertise of those who had been looking. Now, a multinational force, we're hearing that the police and even the ADF might have a role here. Well,
Kieran, the site, we've been advised from Air Marshal Houston, who is over there coordinating the efforts for us, that the site is as large as about 50 square kilometres that needs to be properly secure and forensically gone through to try to find any evidence, any remains, and any parts of the plane which may provide further information for us. Now, the Prime Minister has asked for options from his senior officials as to how that can be done. He's carefully going to consider those options and move forward with them. But he has stressed, as he did yesterday, that any action that we take would be in cooperation with our partners in grief and would be done under the auspices of the United Nations Security Council resolution, which called for the dignified access and repatriation of those bodies as a matter of urgency.
Nick Champion, the Prime Minister said yesterday, we will not leave until everyone's remains have left that country. That is a commitment that the Prime Minister was quite right to give. You could only imagine the turmoil and grief of those families, of the loved ones of the victims.
Well, indeed, all the victims of this terrible tragedy, this crime, deserve to be, dealt with dignity and treated with dignity. And I guess the whole of Australia shares the Prime Minister's sentiments in this regard. And we sort of hope that the crash site can be preserved, that some cooperation can be given to us by all those people who are in that ungoverned space, that ungoverned bit of territory at the moment, that contested bit of territory. We hope that they can at least provide, the room for us to be able to do that, so the victims can be treated with dignity and the perpetrators can be brought to justice.
It's a very tough ask, though, that second point you make, Nick Champion, bringing the perpetrators to justice. There's a sense that the Russians might, even if there is this investigation, that there might be enough wiggle room for them to deflect the blame. That's a real fear here, isn't it?
Well, I guess we're dealing with an area which is being contested by irregular military forces, rebel forces, and by the government of Ukraine. So it's a very difficult situation to try and secure the crash site in what effectively is a war zone. And obviously the government's taking options, seeking options about how we might do that in conjunction with the United Nations and others, and that sounds to me to be a sensible course of action.
Alan Tudge, on that point, the difficulty involved in securing this site, it does remain a war zone. Any Australian police or ADF would be going into a very dicey situation if this multinational force does go ahead as expected, a Dutch-led multinational force.
I don't want to say too much here, Kieran, but only to just re-emphasise that the Prime Minister is considering all the available options, and certainly no action would be taken unless it was in cooperation with our partners in grief, if you like, and under the proper auspice of the United Nations Security Council resolution. It's a difficult matter, it's a sensitive matter, but we have absolute determination and resolve to ensure that all Australian bodies are properly identified and repatriated.
Before we go to a break, I want to play you some comments made by the Foreign Minister and the Governor-General, Sir Peter Cosgrove, who were both at the Eindhoven Air Base in the Netherlands overnight.
Felt very privileged today to represent all the families. I felt privileged to represent all Australians. This is a long journey home.
The ceremony we saw today was dignified and provided the level of respect that those who were killed in this crash have deserved from the outset.
The Foreign Minister and Governor-General there in the Netherlands. Will have more after the break on AM Agenda.
It's Mum's recipe. A steaming, bubbling history lesson in home cooking. It's overloaded and it's lopsided. This pie is made with love. This pie is made with Western Star.
Australia's biggest stocktake sale ends Sunday with 40% off the original price of Manchester and travel goods and 15% off the original price of electrical appliances. Exclusions apply, cannot be used with other offers, ends Sunday.
My mum makes underwater fans that are powered by the moon. She makes aeroplane engines that can talk. She makes trains that are friends with trees. My mum works at GE.
Go. Go on. Go explore. Go with the waves. Lead the brave. Go deep. Go steep. Try. Dare. Go everywhere. To oceans where no one's gone.
At Medibank, we believe in bettering your health from the day you join. That's why you can get your annual dental checkups straight away. No gap to pay when you join Medibank Hospital and Extras. Better health from the get-go. All part of Generation Better. Call Medibank today.
Thank Mum with a personalised Good On Your Mum song at mumsongdedications.com.
The same hotel. The same experience. But two different prices. Trivago compares over 500,000 hotels from more than 150 websites to find your ideal hotel at the best price. Hotel Trivago.
Introducing the Suncorp Bank Wow Factor rate. A home loan rate so low, it's only on offer for a limited time. Call your broker or Suncorp Bank on 13 11 75.
Sky News Property is your new online resource for investment news, advice and opinion. The vital stats suburb by suburb. The best in the business help you make the right move. property.skynews.com.au.
This is AIM Agenda. Thanks for your company. We're going live now to Amsterdam. CNN reporter Erin McLaughlin standing by. Erin, we saw the ceremony, a dignified ceremony for the arrival of the first 40 caskets. Sadly, this is something that's going to be repeated several times over coming days.
That's right, Kieran, and the contrast between the ceremony that took place today in the Netherlands and the way the bodies were treated in the Russian rebel-controlled part of eastern Ukraine could not have been more apparent. In eastern Ukraine, there are reports of body snatching around the crash site. There are also reports of looting. They were unceremoniously loaded onto refrigerated freight trains where they were brought to Ukrainian-controlled Kharkiv. And then loaded onto planes and brought here. Here in the Netherlands, they had a national day of mourning, the first national day of mourning for Holland since 1962. They were greeted at the airport, the bodies, by the dignitaries, both the King and the Queen, and then they were loaded onto hearses. Crowds lined the streets along this route where they came to this military base. They were clapping, applauding them as they drove by through those gates just over that way. They're brought to a medical facility where a team of technicians are beginning to work on the identification process. Outside this military base in Hilversum, people pretty much all night have been coming here to lay flowers and candles and show signs of respect. It was a very somber day here in Holland. Kieran?
Erin, have the authorities given any indication as to how long the forensic process, the identification process might take?
Well, I spoke to one of the chief forensic officers, and he said this is going to be a slow and painstaking process. He said that it could take months before all of the victims are identified. There's a team here at the military base working with the bodies, and then there's another team outside, a team of investigators that are interviewing the families. And it's a very detailed interview process. They're collecting information such as DNA, fingerprints, descriptions of the bodies. I talked to one family who said that the interview process lasted around 4 hours. They lost 2 boys to MH17, and they said it was an incredibly emotional interview. But the chief forensic officer that I talked to says that it was necessary. They need as much information as possible. There's no room for error in the science, and the last thing they'd want to have to do is go back to the families to get more information. Now, all of the bodies, the hope is, will be identified at this military base. The Dutch have particular expertise in this area. The same team that are working to identify these bodies actually identified the victims in 2005 in the tsunami. They also worked in 2010 in Libya to identify victims of an airplane crash there. The Dutch actually, in part, established or helped to find the protocol for the international protocol for some of this forensic identification process. So they really do know what they're doing, and they told me that as soon as they identify a victim, then immediately they will notify that family and return the body to the family as soon as possible. Kieran?
CNN reporter Erin McLaughlin in Amsterdam, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it. We're back to Alan Tudge now and Nick Champion. Gentlemen, I want to conclude the program this morning with a change of attack to domestic politics, and the biography of Joe Hockey to be released today hasn't gone down well with many of your colleagues, Alan Tudge.
Oh, there's all sorts of biographies which are written, some authorised, some are unauthorised, Kieran. This one is in relation to Joe Hockey, but he is doing an outstanding job as Treasurer. He's very focused on getting the budget back under control, fixing Labor's debt and deficit disasters, ensuring that we have higher workforce participation and most importantly, ensuring jobs growth. And we've had 100,000 new jobs created over the last 9 months. So he's got a big job to do, but Joe Hockey's doing it exceptionally well.
That's not the view of some of his cabinet colleagues. According to Dennis Shanahan this morning in The Australian, I just want to read this to you, Alan, Tudge. Dennis Shanahan says some of Hockey's cabinet colleagues see the Treasurer's ratification of the book's conclusions as a final act of self-indulgence and what must be the last act of indulgence from Prime Minister Tony Abbott.
They're Dennis Shanahan's comments. As far as the coalition is concerned, the Treasurer is doing a terrific job. He's got an enormous task because we inherited a very difficult financial position. We inherited an economy which was sluggish, and our job is to get the finances back under control, is to try to get the economy growing again so that there can be greater wealth and more job opportunities for all Australians, and that is firmly the task for the Treasurer and the rest of the Cabinet, and that's what we're focused on.
Nick Champion, Alan Tudge is right in saying that political biographies are a dime a dozen, and political books and comments from the Labor Party have been flowing pretty freely in recent times as well.
Well, this is an interesting biography in terms of the government. It tells you a lot about the government. It tells you that it's divided on its budget strategy. Joe Hockey wanted to go harder, be more vicious, more nasty, and he's revealed this in this, in this biography. It reveals that there are leadership aspirations of the Treasurer, and they're commented on by no less than the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. And that we have a series of cabinet rivalries because we have commentary about how Joe will never trust Malcolm Turnbull again. So it's an extraordinary set of revelations to have in a biography at the start of a government. You might expect it at the end of a government or after a government's concluded, but to have these things expressed in a book at this point of a government's life is nothing short of extraordinary. And if I was on the backbench of the Liberal Party or the National Party, I'd be pretty angry because it is self-indulgent, and they're right to question whether the adults are in charge at all.
Well, Alan Tudge, I guess the timing of the book in the first term, in fact, the first year of the government, that it is unusual to have this sort of biography so early.
Let's not get too caught up about this, Kieran. It's one book out of many, many books which are written about politicians and public life and public policy. It will be launched today. It covers Joe Hockey's life and some of his political thinking. Overall, though, the government is firmly focused on the task ahead. That includes, obviously, what we've been discussing already this morning, most importantly. But beyond that, of course, it includes getting control of the budget and other measures which we're working on. That's our central focus. We're not being distracted by any biography or any book written. We've got our task ahead of us, and that's what we're going about doing.
In terms of the debate between the Treasurer and the Prime Minister, as detailed in this book, Nick Champion, it's normal for that sort of debate to happen around budget-making processes.
Well, it might be normal for that debate to go on around cabinet tables. You might expect that, but it's very rare for it to be revealed so early in a government's life and so early in a budget's life. I mean, there's nothing short of extraordinary for the budget strategy for a Treasurer to be revealing that he wanted to go harder, and I wouldn't have thought it does much for the government's unity. I wouldn't have thought it does much for the government's reputation. I think if I was on the backbench or even in the cabinet of the Abbott government, I'd be pretty angry about this biography and the revelations in it. But it seems like there's a collective lapse of discipline on the government side, and this early in the government's life, it doesn't bode well for them. I just hope they keep having many more of these books.
I want to finish with.
I don't want to get lectured to by Nick Champion in relation to books written by Labor Party members and comments made internally after the last 6 years that we've had, Nick.
Well, bad luck, Alan. You are going to get a bit of a lecture about it.
Okay, well, let's move on. I want to ask you about the GP co-payment exemptions. Channel 7's Mark Riley reported this last night, that the federal government's plan of the $7 co-payment has a crack. That the 7 News reported that war veterans have won an exemption, Alan Tudge, so it won't be across the board, the $7 co-payment.
Kieran, that exemption was always in place. It was announced on budget night. It was in the budget papers. It's been up on the Veteran Affairs Minister's website since the budget day. This is just a bit of scaremongering by Tanya Plibersek, who I understand has put this story out, and frankly it's a bit of sloppy journalism to boot.
Well, it wasn't publicised by the government at the time, was it? If it's buried in some documents, it's hard to see.
It was on the Veterans Affairs website, and it's in the budget papers. So that exemption was always there. There's always been an exemption for the TPA gold card holders and white card holders. There's always been a safety net in place such that there'll be a $70 cap for about 40% of the Australian population, all those pensioners, all those other people with concession card holders. They have been known since the budget. It's in the budget papers, it's on the website. There is nothing new in this story.
Nick Champion, what do you make of this? I guess it could be all a bit irrelevant because it looks like the co-payment won't get through the Senate anyway.
Well, we know the GP tax, the $7 cascading tax that will apply every time you go anywhere near a waiting room or every time you get a blood test. We know that this is a universally unpopular budget proposal because it strikes at the heart of Medicare, it strikes at the heart of universal health care, and no amount of exemptions or wiggling out of it by the government's spokespeople will hide the manifest unfairness of this, and it's an attempt, I think, to take us down an American road where your health care is decided by your income. And yesterday we had the head of the AMA talking about his fears that the government will go down a managed healthcare path where some private health insurance bureaucrat will be getting in between you and your doctor in the type of care that you'll be receiving by your GP or in a hospital. And that is a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Nick Champion, Alan Tudge, thank you, gents. We're out of time.